What a healthcare startup company needs when it comes to marketing is a lot different than an established brand. They need to work scrappier. They have to work with what they have, and they do not have as many chances to fail. They need all the help that they can get. And so this episode is for you if you are in that place. Sandyha leads growth marketing at Complete Sleep. Complete Sleep is transforming the management of sleep apnea with their products. And Sandyha knows everything about going to market and growing once you're there when it comes to health tech, telemedicine. And she didn't get her start there, which makes her journey a little bit unique. And we're going to hear about that. And then we're going to dive into all of her tactical and practical tips for growing a healthcare startup. I'd like to start off kind of talking a little bit about your background.
Sure.
If you can give us Sandyha in 2 minutes. I know before being in the health space, you had a lot of agency experience. So I guess give us that period of your life and what kind of got you into marketing and then growth marketing.
Yeah, sure. I like to say early stage of my career when I was quite junior, my first experience was at an agency. And I think kind of my biggest learning coming out of that was empathy and really valuing the relationship with the client. And one of the things I really held on because I moved client side after that when I joined Diageo was just collaboration with agencies and really thinking about them as a partner. And I think that how I chose to cultivate that relationship really came from my first job at an agency where I was quite junior. But yeah, I started off my career in marketing. I interned at Diageo when I was in business school. I went back full time and I was there for a decade, worked across a number of different brands and categories, also in different markets. So it gave me a really good understanding of innovation and launching brands in different markets at different stages of development. So fantastic experience, lots of resources, lots of great agency partners. And I really had the ability to touch every single channel of marketing with scale, which is an incredible experience to have. Then the pandemic came around and I was reflecting on my life like many people were. And I decided I wanted to flip my experience entirely. So I was working on big global brands, big behemoth brands where growth was, a rounding error. And I really wanted to think about what the experience would be like if I was building something from the ground up and really thinking about those core fundamental marketing assets and how do you launch a new brand. And so I decided I wanted to pivot from CPG to early stage. And I was specifically looking for something mission driven. So I was looking within ed tech and health tech. And that led to my first early stage experience, which was at Little Otter, which is a pediatric mental health care company. And I joined them as the first marketing and growth hire and was with them for just over 2 years, really building the brand and building the growth engine. And I have since continued to stay in early stage across a couple different companies and now at Complete Sleep leading growth and marketing.
But it wasn't an easy transition, right? I know obviously we've known each other for a while now and talked about getting from that initial move and then potentially being considered for a role in health tech. What did some of those early conversations look like? The ones that maybe turned you down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will tell you, I talked to a number of different recruiters, and most of them looked at my resume and said, no early stage company will ever consider you. I'd been at one big global company for 10 years. So there wasn't a lot on my resume that indicated that I was good at adapting and moving quickly and driving impact. And so I really had to make a case for what I wanted to accomplish. And really that was through partly my own storytelling, but I also did do a bit of consulting as well. And that also helped me prove my ability to create a go-to-market strategy for an early stage company, build some credibility. And that certainly did help with that first full-time job. But the early part of my resume was really, since it was at one company, it did make it quite challenging breaking into the early stage space.
For some of those consulting projects, Do you remember why some of them were willing to kind of take a chance on you and how some of those projects went? Can you dive into maybe one of them?
Yeah, definitely. All those projects, were really made through connections that I had in my network and through business school. And this was, if you think about the timing of it, so we're in the pandemic. There's a lot of health tech emerging. The pandemic has really opened the door for more health access through virtual care. And so you actually had a lot of health tech brands that were looking to behave like D2C brands. And if you think about historically healthcare marketing, it has not really taken advantage of a lot of the levers that brands use from a direct to consumer perspective. So really building the brand, talking to the consumer in an accessible way, showing up in the spaces where they are, speaking to them and explaining to them in very accessible language what the benefits are and what the value proposition is. And so I think, obviously health tech has come a very long way since then, but early on, there were companies that were looking to kind of leverage those learnings from direct to consumer and apply them to health tech. So I think that was one thing that sort of got my foot in the door, along with, a warm connection that helped with credibility.
Yeah. And when you went into Little Otter with a couple different, notches in your belt of doing that, had they always at that point been focused D2C? And then what did you kind of maybe learn from them and merge with some of those projects you'd been doing to help take things to the next level?
Yeah. So when I joined Little Otter, they were focused on direct to consumer. So it was really about building the brand from the ground up. We had, a beautiful Otter asset that was the representation of the brand. And I really was focused on building a brand world around that with supporting marketing assets. And so, with early stage, you're always focused on one channel, at least to start. You're thinking about lean resources and lean teams. So it's hard to tackle every channel at once. So being really focused on direct to consumer allowed us to really hone in on our marketing messages and our value prop and really determine what was that right fit for the customer. And then, once we learned from that, we started to expand our channels from growth and then moving into the B2B and payer side of the business. But the business did launch direct to consumer. And I think very similar to a lot of early stage, you go all in on that one channel to start, learn, identify product market fit, and then expand and scale from there.
What was the first channel you guys were using?
We were entirely focused on digital, so largely performance marketing. So a lot of Meta, Google, and Bing, the taxi pay as an early stage to be on those platforms. And then we were focused on organic as well. So it was really this coupled effort of performance marketing, building the brand, and then organic SEO, which is a bit of the long game, and that environment continues to change even as we look at it now, but really starting that foundation, knowing that it takes time to build SEO.
What was kind of that moment when you felt released to move into a second channel? Was there like a metric you hit or were targeting to hit? Was there more capability within the company, more capacity?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So I'd say the one KPI across every early stage experience I've had is CAC, the cost of acquisition, the cost per acquisition. And so getting that to an efficient level, and that looks different at different companies at different stages. Once we got that CAC to a key benchmark that we were focused on, it allowed us to open up another channel. And in doing so, it also allowed us to start to grow the team. So I think those things are coupled. So once you reach a success metric in one channel, it opens up the door to another channel and then also makes the case for how you want to build that marketing team to support the channels of growth and the priorities.
Sure. What was some of the message? Because, I think about as even a father myself, pediatrics, right? And then telehealth in the combination of those two worlds. What was some of the message that you guys were pushing at the time to help build trust for those early adopters?
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's interesting then the way that I think about trust in healthcare is that it's not a marketing objective. It's really fundamental to the business model. And I think recognizing that trust is not just being leveraged through marketing, but across everything that you do, that really does allow you to truly infuse that across the core business. And then it starts to show up in every single touch point with the customer. Not surprisingly, we started with research, customer research, to really understand our parents, using focus groups, really allowing us to get a really clear understanding on creating the right messaging that hits on the needs that parents have, as well as the benefits that we were communicating. And then we focused on transparency throughout our parent experience, ensuring that the clinical qualifications were always being featured, that we were really, really clear about the treatment. And so we really sort of coupled the marketing objectives and how we communicate trust alongside the patient journey, and really ensuring consistency across both those things. So I think the key learning there is that building credibility is much more than a marketing objective, and it really has to come across in every single touch point.
Yeah. One of the things I think I found to be unique when our video agencies started focusing within the health and wellness space was how often I began to hear exactly what you're saying, that trust isn't just part of marketing, but it actually ends up affecting outcomes. Often, right? Like, you have to trust your provider. And if trust can actually begin to be built before the actual choice to engage, you're actually that much further along to be receptive to treatment in whatever kind of way it's being delivered or what kind of service is being offered.
Yeah, I think that's 100% right, Dustin. The other thing I would say is I think social proof plays a huge role here to help drive that trust and credibility. And so that happens through testimonials, right? You had parents that had had a positive experience with us, so them sharing that and allowing other parents to see that, alongside with case studies that are actually showing outcomes, that are showing our outcome data. So I think social proof can be accomplished in a lot of different ways, and that plays a huge role as well.
Do you have any strategies for how you, with empathy, approached testimonials from people who are coming out of health situations? How have you done that over the years?
Yeah, it can be quite challenging in the health space, because oftentimes there's more privacy around what people want to share. But one of the things is we've approached it really just with one-on-one outreach. And so sort of following a conversion, which could happen at various stages in the patient journey, we will reach out to understand how people felt about the process. And then there's also another touch point after actually receiving services to understand, how they felt in the moment with the clinician, with the outcome of the services. And I think being able to decouple that feedback around process from how they actually felt in the experience, I think that was a great way for us to really round out the types of testimonials that we were getting, and being able to showcase the true value of a virtual offering, because there is a process component around accessibility and being able to access a provider on your own time, from your couch. I think that's a huge part of the convenience and what we're offering, alongside what the outcome and the experience actually is like. And I think being able to decouple those and being able to ask questions and get feedback around them separately helps really round out the types of testimonials that we got and how we were able to feature them.
Yeah. From a strategy standpoint, were there certain marketing messages that you were looking to hit with certain testimonials and kind of pursued people for those specific areas? Could you break down maybe what those were, what those messages were around?
In an ideal world as a marketer, I could tell you exactly the sorts of testimonials I want. I think what makes the testimonial valuable is that it's authentic and that it is in the voice of the customer. And I think creating space for that is really important, and ensuring that they're not really curated. So my approach is much more hands-off in terms of kind of asking an open-ended question and getting the feedback. I think otherwise, if it starts to feel like something the brand is saying, it becomes much closer to a brand message rather than a testimonial. As a consumer, I'm on websites all the time, and I can tell you which of those testimonials are truly authentic, coming from a customer's point of view, and those that are not. And so I take a real hands-off approach in that way. I think the value in testimonials is transparency. And so if a word is misspelled, if you have 4 stars and not 5 stars, if you have 3 stars. I think that authenticity is really important. And so showcasing the full breadth of how customers are feeling is really, really important. Of course, we're always striving to be the best. And I think then learning from those testimonials around what we can continue to improve, what are the areas that we really want to lean in and focus on, because we know they're working, alongside what some of the optimization areas are. But, I think authenticity is really important. So, I'm a marketer that, that's not trying to curate those testimonials.
Sure. Yeah, it is such a funny balance because, the testimonial, the video case study are things that, we're so frequently working on. And in preparation to do those, one of the things that we always do is do a pre-interview call with the person who's gonna be speaking or sharing their story, and take 20 minutes just to hear what they have to say, not try and push it in a certain direction, but just hear, okay, what are actually the areas in alignment with our focused message that we'll want to build our questions around. And I love you mentioning the 3 stars or the 4-star reviews, because when you just see a list of 5, on every post for a website, you think, nah, that's not the case.
But what I love, Dustin, about your approach, like you said, that pre-call, it's an open-ended question, right? And it's to hear from them and to hear what is important to them. And then that allows you to then kind of steer where the focus areas of that video testimonial. But I think starting with that open-ended approach is what I'm a huge advocate for.
And when we met, you were no longer obviously with Little Otter, but over at Complete Sleep.
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about, when you went back into the market and then landed with Complete Sleep. What was that initial kind of conversation look like, and some of the goals that the team was looking to get by bringing you in?
Yeah. So I will say it was much easier the second time around. Being on the market, having had one early stage experience in my corner. I had done some consulting, again, in between. So there was great experience there just in terms of like staying informed around what's happening in the category, changes in the category. So that was helpful as well in terms of building credibility. And I crossed paths with Andres Moran, our founder, during my job search. And I joined Complete Sleep at the same time as Little Otter. So as the first marketing and growth hire. And really, I was brought in at a similar time to build the go-to-market strategy and then execute on that strategy. So like I said, I think, having had experience in early stage, my story was much more clear. I had some KPIs to back it up and real concrete wins in terms of what I was able to accomplish over a short period of time. I think that's kind of the key for early stage, because time is your biggest enemy. And so it's really about how can you move quickly and be agile and be lean with resources and still deliver. And I had that really clear story then. So it was much easier the second time around when I was talking to recruiters and founders.
Yeah. You talked about diving into a first channel, right? Picking a first channel with early stage. What was the first channel within Complete Sleep that you focused on?
Yeah. So similarly, we were focused on digital and performance marketing. And so a similar strategy in terms of Meta, Google, Bing. So really focused on Meta and paid search. And when I joined Complete Sleep, we launched with still assets. We didn't have any video assets. And our first foray into video assets before we crossed paths with you was in the UGC space. And we realized, a very efficient channel for creating authentic content from users. We continually saw our video assets outperforming our still assets. The gap that we had was around some of the brand messaging that we wanted to come through that wasn't coming through with the UGC assets. And that's when we really started to think about how do we fill that gap with video? And that's kind of that's what led us to crossing paths with you and Union.
Yeah, and glad we did, because we had some fun creating some great stuff together. Tell me a little bit about like the pros and cons, or breakdown for somebody who's in the stage that you were at with Complete Sleep, using UGC and content creators. I think it's a necessary part of your content mix, right? But there's pros and cons. So maybe for somebody who's considering going into it, what are some of the things that you should expect to be able to get out of it, and how can you lead those people best?
Yeah, very similar to what we're speaking about with testimonials. A lot of power in terms of hearing from users, and for a message to come from the user in their voice in a way that's going to resonate with their audience. And so again, it's a little bit of having to give up some of that curation that you hold really close when it comes to a brand and allow them to speak in their voice. A really strong brief is imperative to get UGC content that's actually going to work for you. And so in terms of how we approached UGC, it was really 3 core points that we wanted to be able to communicate around complete sleep, and then let the user communicate those points in their voice. So we weren't focused on the exact words or messages, but it's really about communicating the points for us. And that, like I said, very incredibly successful for creating efficiently and very quickly creating video content that we didn't otherwise have, and we didn't have the resources internally to create them ourselves. As we started to piece together all those UGC videos and we looked at all of those messages, we saw there was an opportunity for a brand voice to come in and be able to do some of that storytelling. And it was in the context of seeing all the UGC pieces of content and what they were delivering for us. It opened up that pathway for us to see what was the next piece of content that we needed to create. And that was a brand-led message in a video format.
Sure. What did it look like? Because I'm on this side of the table. What does it look like behind the closed doors when the first idea of let's do something a little bit more premium in video gets brought to the table? What does that conversation look like? And what are some of the concerns, honestly?
Yeah, I think like on our side, I think it was a pretty easy conversation. And quite frankly, we knew it was something that we always wanted. It was more about when do we create that asset? And I think, getting a little bit of momentum and scale, understanding our audience. Once we started to see that, that's when we decided it was time to think about a brand-led video message. And so for us, it was never about if we were going to do it. It was just about when we were going to do it. When is the right time to introduce that? And like I said, once we had built a little bit of momentum and we felt like we really were getting saturation with the assets that we had, we thought about what is the next message that we want to create. And some of the key things that we were thinking about is, one, we want it to be like a 360 always on message. So this message is always relevant. It's not seasonal. It's not promotional, but it is a message that's going to resonate all year. As you know this, Dustin, this is the asset that we've spent the most money on. And so for us, it was incredibly important that it could live in every channel, that we would be able to leverage it in paid and organic, and that we were speaking about our benefits and the value proposition in a brand-led, empathetic storytelling way where we're really taking the customer through what it is that we're delivering and what are the benefits.
Sure. Yeah, no, I think the ability to control the message and know that you're going to be able to communicate your story in a premium way, it feels so beneficial. Obviously, there's people involved, right? So you have the growth marketer's perspective, and then, Andres is on the team holding down the C-suite, and then there's Tom involved. What were some of the things that each of the stakeholders was hoping to get out of it, maybe individually, right? Because you have a collective desire, but were there any differences between what you were envisioning or what Andres was envisioning in terms of what this would do, or anything specific? Or maybe it was the same.
Yeah, quite frankly, we were all quite aligned, actually. And I think, because we were focused on this brand-led story that really spoke to our benefits, it was relevant on the customer success side of the business. It's relevant across kind of all marketing and growth assets. And even from Andres's perspective, it's a video that we can share with investors and stakeholders because it helps them understand what our product and service is. So I think we were all very, very well aligned. And I think that's because we saw this not only as a marketing asset, but as like a business development asset. It really served both of those purposes for us. The video content really did so much of that heavy lifting because we're trying to tell a story around sleep, as well as the solution that we're bringing to the table for sleep apnea. And so it just demonstrated that it was able to hit outcomes across multiple stakeholders.
Yeah. And you're obviously focused on, CAC and other metrics related to what creative is helping to deliver for ads, but also you talked about organic placements. And I know that campaign's been running for close to 6 months.
Correct.
Now.
Yeah, we're still running the asset everywhere we can.
Yeah. What are some of the signals you've been getting back from it, some of the results, whether comparative to what you were doing previously or just benchmarks that you were against what you were hoping to achieve video?
Yeah. So one thing we consistently have seen the video asset outperform still by 40% or more. I think generally we know that video outperforms stills, but that even exceeded our expectations and exceeded the benchmark even around UGC videos outperforming stills. So that's something that we have consistently seen. Another metric that was such a huge success metric for us was that, as we know, we did a OTT buy in Q4 of last year, and we were able to leverage this asset on that buy. And we saw 150% branded lift increase in impressions. So that means that people who watched the ad, they were then searching for us afterwards. And so that was such a huge win for us because it means that the message was resonating and that people were remembering it going into, their preferred search engine and actually typing, being in our company to learn more. And we had a vanity URL. So we were able to track the metrics coming from the ad. So those are two of the metrics that we've been consistently looking at, and we're still maintaining those performance levels, as you said, 6 months in.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think one of the things, and we had this conversation early on, was that, especially when somebody's doing their first venture into premium content, like you said, video is never a cheap investment to do when you're trying to have an agency spend the time on not only making it well, but thinking about it well beforehand. And I think in that, the return has to be done in such a way that it's exactly what you said, the shelf life has to exist. So when you're going in for the first time, making sure that that message is the core of the differentiation is so critical before going into other cute campaigns to kind of test or trying to push almost the creative envelope in a way that maybe gets noticed, but doesn't bring clarity. And I think that's one of the critical differences that I think I see, and you guys believed along with us from the beginning, was that if we can communicate both premium, creative, and clear so that people understand, it'll make a big difference going in.
100%. And I think, some of the other pieces that we learned through that storytelling is the value of the frame by frame view of our ad, right? And being able to tell two stories at once.
Yes.
And watching those two stories side by side. I think that really helped bring to life a comparison point for us in the sleep apnea space, which is huge. Again, I think that was incredibly powerful because we had talked about what are the different points of view that we want to feature. And I know we looked at some different versions of the side-by-side frame as well as a single story. Another piece in terms of just like getting the absolute value out of the asset, we worked with you and your team on multiple CTAs versions with sound and without sound, with copy on the screen and without. And so that created all the different iterations that we needed in order to show up in social, in order to be on YouTube, in order to do the OTT buy, and one day we hope to have a TV buy, and we'd love to be able to leverage this asset. For that as well, maybe after fundraising. But again, I have as much confidence in that asset for a bigger buy because I really do think that we created so many different iterations that really helps it fit in the right channel rather than force fitting one message in every single channel.
Yeah, the ability to take, a project and like just juice it like an orange into all kinds of different shapes of cups and sizes and it makes a couple more of my hairs turn gray when I see a social ad that's in a vertical placement, still confined to a 16:9 box. And I just think you could have just planned for this. Right. And optimized the space and the quality of the creative ends up getting lost because it's not planned for the channel which it's being delivered through.
And I think it just requires a little bit of planning up front. But I think we took the time to do that. And your team was really, really great in asking all the right questions that really forced us to think about spec sizes, sound, no sound, the implications of those choices. And it just takes a bit more time. But I think that planning really pays off because like you said, then people can really focus on the message. The message is optimized for the channel. And I think that's why we're seeing the success that we are with that asset.
Yeah. What are you you excited for coming up? How about yourself personally? Some of the things that you're working on within the organization, anything you can share with us that you're especially excited about over the next 6 months?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a couple things. So, in terms of my remit and the things that I'm working on, one is an expanded approach to measurement. I think we do a really good job of the full marketing funnel from awareness down to conversion, but really now focusing on linking pre-purchase and post-purchase. So, really understanding, that first point where we reach the consumer up to conversion. And then we have a long post-purchase journey that we need to pull customers through. So really kind of connecting those pieces so that we do have an expanded approach to measurement. So that's one thing that I'm excited on and working with the team on. Another piece is around, really thinking about hybrid customer journeys. I think the future is not purely digital and it's not purely in person. It is an integrated experience. And our solution is virtual. We make it really, really easy for you, but we do have some human touch points in there. We do have calls from our customer success team and clinical calls and follow-up calls. And I think it's really how we're carefully and thoughtfully inserting those human-centric customer touch points. I think that really enhances the journey and the value that we're delivering for customers. I think there's ways for us to continually optimize on that front. So I think I'm really excited about this idea of thinking about a hybrid customer journey and really linking all of those online and offline customer points. And then, of course, I have to mention AI because I think opportunities around customization and tailored experiences, and that's not novel or new, right? Everyone's doing it, but it's so powerful for an early stage company because it allows us to create more assets with very lean teams. And it's something we wouldn't normally be able to do at this early stage. So that's really exciting as well. So yeah, those are things that I'm really excited about and excited for complete sleep as we get to this next stage of growth.
And as you're advising some of the other companies that are in similar spaces to where you've been, what are some of the things that you see them either as hurdles within their marketing that they're having to overcome? Any sort of threads that seem consistent in the space?
I think one point of consistency is just really thinking about A/B testing different marketing messages and continually optimizing. I'm a huge proponent of measurement in general, but testing and learning, there's so many quick and dirty ways to test and learn quickly. And that is so, so powerful because it really does help you optimize the message. And that's something I'm seeing across the board. And again, I think there's so much power in that, especially for early stage companies to really kind of up level and start to hone in on new audiences a bit more quickly. And that's a thread that I'm seeing across the companies that I work with and an area where I support from an advising perspective as well as to how to think about structuring those tests and measurement around them, and then how to continue to iterate on them.
Could you dive a little more tactically into that in terms of maybe some of your favorite approaches that you advise a lot of companies to begin? Like if we could put like a little bit more tacticalness to how to approach
Yeah, of course. So I think, it's usually starting with 2 or 3 assets. And I like to think about decoupling the visual from the message. And that's a way that you can really cleanly test. So you think same visual with 2 different messages. You do an A/B test. Couple $100 of spend. You don't have to spend a lot of money. There's usually one clear winner that starts to pick up. And then once you have the winning message, you can start to test visuals. So then you take the same message and then you're testing 2 or 3 different visuals. Then again, a couple $100 very quickly, you'll start to see the winners that emerge. And so it's continuing to iterate in that fashion. I see a lot of brands test a lot, but if you test too many things at once, you don't quite know what's working. So if you're testing multiple messages alongside multiple visuals, it's not quite clear what the learnings are. And so I really do like to decouple message from visual because those resonate in different ways for people.
Do you always take the message first and then the visual? Is there a reason for that?
Not always. No, not always. I think there are approaches for taking one over the other, and I don't feel strongly about doing one over the other. It's more important that I'm wanting to decouple. It often can be stakeholders are very interested in a visual representation or copy that might drive which one is happening first.
Yeah. Yeah. Some internal preferences and maybe even politics that play in. But as long as at least you're getting the testing done, as long as you're learning from it. Excellent. Well, Sandyha, I think this was a masterclass in getting growth marketing going for some early stage health brands, especially telehealth. I feel like there's a new company every day.
Every day. I'm very proud of it. Yeah.
Coming up. So find Sandyha on LinkedIn if you are looking for any additional advice or advising on this area. Clearly, she's a master. And if you're struggling with sleep apnea or think even, snoring or poor sleep,
come to Complete Sleep. We'll take care of you.
Exactly. Sandyha, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much, Justin. A pleasure.